everyone, thank you for stopping by Lavender and Lace today. I'm Alicia, and I have gotten a little bit behind schedule on some of my projects, and that's because Hurricane Helene came through our area. I did just a short video about an update on that, so if you guys would like to see that, I will link that for you. But I didn't want to miss out on doing these fall DIYs and Thanksgiving projects that I had planned. I was super excited about these and I really wanted to show them to you all. So I did have a couple of these done before the storm hit our area, and then I did finish these up later on when we were able to come back home. We were actually out of power for about 12 days and not able to be at our house for about a week and a half. So I apologize that I got behind schedule a little bit, but I hope you enjoy these projects today. And if you like farmhouse DIYs, rustic decor, simple and easy crafts, I hope you will consider subscribing if you haven't already. And without further ado, let's get started with today's projects. I had picked up a couple of these arrow signs from the Dollar Tree back in the summer, and for this project I just started by removing all of those staples and the ribbons. I want these pieces separate. I will be taking 5 of these and putting them together to make a bigger wall piece. And if you can't find like the 18-inch length wooden pieces at your Dollar Tree, these signs will work great for that purpose as well. And then I just took my box cutter and scored some lines until I was able to kind of wiggle that apart and just break off the end. I did not want these to look like an arrow. And then I just took some of my sandpaper and just sanded off those rough edges. And I did this to 5 of these pieces. This makes a really good sized wall decor piece. And then I also just took some of that sandpaper once again and sanded down those rougher edges where those staples came out. And the paper on the front of these pulled off fairly easily. I didn't get all of that off, but I wasn't too concerned about that since that will be the back of this. And then I just laid all of my pieces together and got some measurements for this. I will be doing a tissue paper design on this sign. And then I took some of my Waverly chalk paint and the color plaster and just did one pretty light coat on each of those pieces. I didn't care if I had complete coverage on that. I wanted some of those edges to look a little rough and rustic. And I love how the staples gave a little bit of dimension on that as well. And then I just took some of that sandpaper once again and went around each of those edges, just roughed that up a little bit, and then just removed all of that chalk dust. And to get all of these pieces together, I just took some of my jumbo popsicle sticks and just glued those down on each of those seams. And I also took one and just glued it down the middle just to give that some extra stability. And to get ready for the artwork design on this, I just took some of my Mod Podge and just did a light coat over the entire surface. And I did let this dry for a couple of hours to make sure there wasn't any tackiness left from that Mod Podge. And these half wooden beads were kind of an afterthought. I thought these would look really cute and give this some really good detail on the edges of each of these wood slats. So I just painted those as well with some of that Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster. And then I just took a piece of my printer paper and a piece of tissue paper and got that ready to print. I've done this technique several times, and I will link another video that is more in depth with that if you would like to know how to do that. And this design I found on Creative Fabrica, and I will link that for you guys in the description box. And I just took my scissors and just cut off some of the extra tissue paper just to make sure I didn't have a lot of that white on my design. And then I just centered that onto my wood slats. And I had my little Cricut mini press preheating, and that one is the Cricut brand, but you can also find those on Amazon. They work great for these projects. And I also like to have these Teflon sheets for this project. It just works really well to keep your design protected. And I just start in the middle with my little mini press and just iron that design on. That heat just reactivates your Mod Podge, and you'll get this tissue paper design down without any wrinkles or bubbles. It looks great every time I do this. And then I just went back in with my box cutter and just scored over that tissue paper. I just thought that would help this to look more cohesive and like this was actually made this way. And then I just took some hot glue and glued on those half wooden beads on each side of each of the pieces of wood. I thought those would look like kind of little pegs or wooden nails or something like that. I just like the detail that it gives to this. And to finish this off, I just took another coat of Mod Podge and spread that evenly over the entire surface. Just let that dry completely, and you can put this on a stand or an easel or add a hanger, just whichever way you choose to display this. But I absolutely love the image on this. It just gives me all of those warm and cozy fall vibes. What do you guys think about this one? So I have a habit of picking up a lot of these signs from the Dollar Tree and don't really have a plan for them. I really like the wheelbarrows on this one and those pumpkins on the top. But for this project, I just started by removing everything from that main stake piece of this. And I'm going to be using all of those wooden slats, the ones that have the arrows on them. I think arrows might be a theme so far in these projects. And I just took my pencil and just marked some guidelines for me to go by. I wanted these to be different lengths. And I just took my miter shears and cut those apart. I just got some good score lines there and kind of bent and pulled these back and forth until those broke, and just removed that paper from the front and sanded down those rough edges. And then I just took my Waverly chalk paint in the color ink and gave these all one good coat and let those dry. And then I took some of the Waverly chalk paint in the color mineral and painted those two pieces of another part of this sign. This was kind of an afterthought as well for this project. Sometimes when I'm doing these things, I don't really have a complete game plan. It kind of just comes together as I'm going. And then I painted the main stake of this piece in the color truffle. Just let everything dry really well. And the day I was working on this, my internet wasn't working. Otherwise, I would have looked up some crow faces on Pinterest or somewhere just to give me something to go by. I'm not really good at kind of freehanding stuff. So I just practiced a little bit on this paper towel and tried to decide what kind of faces that I wanted to put on these before I actually started putting them down with paint. And then I just traced them onto each of my crows with a pencil before I go back in with my acrylic paint markers. And I decided I wanted to distress the edges of these before I painted the faces on. So I just took one of these large fingernail files. This works really well for me. I have really good control and I get all of the distressing that I like on the edges of my pieces. And I just distressed that main stake as well with a piece of sandpaper. I want this sign to look like it has been sitting out in the weather for quite some time. And I used these acrylic paint pens that I got from Amazon. I will leave a link for those in the description box. And I just traced over all of those lines that I had put down with a pencil. I just used the white for the eyes and orange for the beaks, and then I go back in with a black acrylic paint pen as well and just do some of the details to the eyes. And these are looking really cute so far. I just love how adding facial features to these just makes these come to life. I wanted these to kind of look whimsical and cartoonish. And then I just did a few highlights with that white acrylic paint pen again. And once I had all of the faces and the details on these, I started kind of laying everything out and deciding what I wanted to put on the stake or the sign part of this. I just looked up some names of different kinds of pumpkins, and I decided to go with Autumn Gold Farms, and I just wrote this out with a pencil. I thought about cutting this out in vinyl with my Cricut Joy, and I just thought it would be easier and simpler to just write this out and just go over that with a Sharpie. I don't really like my handwriting, so most of the time I will choose to do a Cricut or stickers or something like that. But for this project, I thought it just added a little bit more of a rustic country touch to this sign, and I thought it turned out pretty good in the end. And I also just went back in with a brown Sharpie and kind of just gave this some lines and knots that you would find in an actual piece of wood. I just thought that gave that another extra little touch and detail. And I also added some little twine shoelace bows to two of my crows. And then I also added some twine to the bottom of one of these. I wanted these to represent the members of my family. So I wanted to have 2 girls and 2 boys. And then I just started hot gluing everything together. I just glued the main sign that tells you where you're going at the top of my stake. And then I started by gluing the 2 center crows first. That just helped me line everything up and try to keep it centered. And then I absolutely love that wheelbarrow with the pumpkin, so I really wanted to add that to this project. Let me know what you guys think about that, if you think I should have added that or not. And then I just reused those leaves that I had pulled off in the beginning of this. Just took some hot glue and glued those down. And then I just took some Spanish moss and just hot glued that down in a few areas. I thought that was a cute touch for this sign. It just made it look a little bit more weathered. And how cute are these crows? I just love the way that these turned out. They look great with my sweater pumpkins that I made. If you guys want to check that out, I will link that video for you as well. But what do you guys think about these? If you like pumpkin, you really need to try this recipe. I actually found this on Pinterest a few years ago, and the original recipe is 1 banana and 2 eggs, but for these pancakes, I doubled the recipe. So I started by whisking 4 eggs together with about 4 tablespoons of coconut sugar, and then I just added 3/4 to a cup of pureed pumpkin. This recipe is very forgiving. It doesn't have to be exact. And I changed out the banana for the pumpkin for the fall season. These are really good pancakes, and this is actually a keto recipe, so it's a little bit healthier for you. And I added about 1/4 of a teaspoon of almond extract and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And then I added pumpkin pie spice to taste, so I probably added about 2 to 3 teaspoons in my recipe. And I also added a 1/2 cup of gluten-free flour. I added that just a fourth of a cup at a time and just whisked that until it was very well combined and I didn't have any lumps in my pancake batter. And while I was mixing this, I had been preheating my cast iron skillet over medium heat for maybe 4 to 5 minutes, so that was really good and hot when I added my batter. And I added about a fourth of a cup of batter to my skillet, and once I had that added, I did turn down the heat to about medium low because I did not want these to burn. And I cooked these for maybe 3 to 4 minutes per side just until they were golden brown and ready to flip. And I wish you guys could smell these. They smell amazing. I love this recipe. It's so easy, comes together super quick. And I like to serve these with either honey or agave syrup or something like that. And I also added some chopped walnuts to these. This is just a very easy, healthy breakfast, and it is really delicious to have on a cool fall morning. I hope you guys try these and let me know what you think about them. Do you have a wood-burning stove? Then here is a home hack for you. Take your dryer lint that accumulates and just save that. I like to put mine just in a gallon plastic bag close to my fireplace. And of course, while I was videoing this, it was pretty clean. We didn't have a whole lot of lint. But I save it when I know that we're going to be getting close to having some cooler and cold weather, just so I can have that on hand. This is a great fire starter, so I just like to pinch off some smaller sections and add that to my fireplace and start building by adding some smaller pieces of wood to that. This burns really well. It just catches your wood on fire, and it actually burns for quite a while. Usually if I use paper, it doesn't last as long and it doesn't catch my wood on fire. But this lint works really good, and you're kind of recycling that. So I like to do things like that in my home. And once those smaller pieces are burning really well, I start adding some bigger pieces and just building that up. And we actually just this week, it's October the 16th, we have had some very cold weather. We've had a cold snap, and we actually saw a few snow flurries earlier today, which is not good for all of those that were displaced by Hurricane Helene and those that are working to do those repairs. But we're actually going to have a little bit warmer weather over the weekend. So if you guys have fires this fall or this winter, be sure and remember this tip and save your dryer lint. For this project, I'm using the wooden shape garland that I picked up from Hobby Lobby in the fall section, and it was 40% off when I bought this. But at the time of filming, fall stuff is now 50% off, so you might be able to grab that for a little bit cheaper. And I'm using just 2 of the leaves and 1 of the acorns. The rest of the shapes I will set aside for another project. I painted 1 of the leaves with my Waverly chalk paint in the color pumpkin, and the second one I did with the color moss. And I did 2 coats on the front side of these leaves, and I also painted the back just so these would look nice and finished. And then I just stained my acorn with my Waverly antique wax. I just did a good coat of that and wiped off any of the excess with a paper towel. And for some reason, when I was staining this, I thought that if I went the direction that I wanted those lines to look, that it would stay that way. It does that with paint, but obviously it doesn't do that with stain. So just thought that was funny that I was thinking that while I was doing this project. Anyway, I just set those aside to dry, and once everything was completely dry, I went back in with some of that Waverly antique wax and just used one of my small foam pouncers to do a little bit of distressing around the edges and on the surface of my leaves. And then I just measured out the size that I would want for a vinyl decal on the leaves as well as the acorn. And I just went into my Cricut design space and typed out 3 words: thankful, grateful, and blessed. And I just weeded those out using my Cricut tools. And I used my favorite paper transfer tape to apply these to my wooden cutouts. I picked this up from Expressions Vinyl, and this has lasted me for a couple of years, so I haven't had to buy any more of that yet, but you can also find that on Amazon as well. This is just a very low tack transfer tape, so it doesn't pull up any of the paint or stain from your projects. I just burnished that vinyl down really well with one of my Cricut tools, and I didn't have any issues with this vinyl. It applied really well to this surface. It stuck really well the first time, and I didn't have any issues with that trying to pull up on me as I removed that transfer tape. And I had just a piece of sweater left over from some previous projects. I made some sweater pumpkins a couple of weeks ago. Those are one of my favorite fall DIYs that I have done so far. I will link that video for you guys to check out. And I just cut that sweater down into smaller strips just to make it easier to wrap around my wreath form. And this is an 18-inch wreath form that I picked up from the Dollar Tree. And I was afraid I wouldn't have enough of those sweater pieces to completely go around this wreath form. So I did start on the bottom just by wrapping some burlap ribbon that also came from the Dollar Tree, just in that section where I knew those wooden cutouts would go. I just wanted to make sure that I had enough of that sweater. And I just glued that down with some hot glue. And one of those rubber spatulas works great for hot glue projects like this, where it kind of seeps through whatever material that you are working with. I just picked those up from the Dollar Tree, and I like to keep them on hand in my little tool caddy that I move around from different areas while I am crafting. And then I just started wrapping that sweater, doing the same thing as I did with that burlap ribbon, just securing that down with some hot glue. And I made sure I didn't have any gaps on the front before I glued that down on the back. Just continued that all the way around my wreath form until I had it completely covered. And then I was just laying out my wooden cutouts to see where I wanted them. And I kept looking at that acorn, thinking how plain that looked and that I needed to do something else with that so it didn't look so boring. So I found a piece of this peel and stick wallpaper that I had in my stash. I got a couple of different designs of this from the Dollar Tree when they had several in their selection. And I just traced out a small piece and just cut that out and applied it to the cap of my acorn. And I just thought that that gave that a little bit more dimension, and I just like the way that looks. It just changed it up a little bit, and it doesn't look so plain now. And that wallpaper sticks very well. I didn't have any issues with that. It's basically like a big sticker. Just put that down and smoothed it out. And then I just started adding my shapes, putting down a lot of hot glue and holding that until it was secured. And I had some fall flowers and leaves in my stash, and I thought I wanted to add these to this wreath. I wasn't really sure how I wanted to do that, so I just started cutting those apart. And I started just dry fitting those here and there, tucking them in, and I played around with that maybe for 25 to 30 minutes, and I couldn't decide if I liked that or not. Let me know what you guys think, if you think adding those leaves was a good addition. I opted not to add those little sunflowers. I just thought that they didn't sit right in the wreath, so they didn't look right to me. So I just wound up adding a few extra leaves here and there, and I didn't even hot glue these in because I thought if I actually didn't like it in the end, it would just be super easy to pull those out and change them around as needed. And then I just took a smaller piece of my sweater, just hot glued that on the back to make a hanger. And before I hung this up, I did tie a knot in the top of that sweater just so it wouldn't stretch too much, and I was afraid that it might have too much weight on there and completely pull off of my wreath form. So just keep that in mind. But once I added that hanger, this wreath was ready to go, and I love this sweater look on here. It just looks so cozy and inviting on my front door. What do you guys think about this one? For this project, you will need some very simple materials. You'll need some cardboard, some felt, and some type of small container that you will want to use as a pie tin. I found these plastic, I think they were called sauce ramekins at the Dollar Tree, and those were 3 in a pack. And I just traced the top of those with or out of my cardboard, excuse me, and then I used those cardboard circles to trace out my felt, and I have orange, white, and tan that I will be working with for this project. I just cut out my felt once I had all of that traced, and I have seen this project in a couple of different places, and other crafters have made this, and I wanted to try my hand, and this was my take at how I did this, and I think it turns out really cute. I can't wait for you guys to see the finished product. Then I just used some hot glue to attach my orange felt piece to my cardboard piece. And I actually didn't like this orange color, but they didn't have the pumpkin orange at Hobby Lobby the day that I went and purchased this. So I just took a foam brush and added some of my pumpkin chalk paint to the top of these to just change that color up to make it look a little bit more like a pumpkin pie. And while that paint was still wet, I just added a little bit of pumpkin pie spice to the top. Just sprinkled that lightly over and just dab that in with the tip of my finger. And then I just set those aside to dry completely. And while those were drying, I just took a square piece of felt. Graceland actually helped me with this part. We are making the whipped cream to go on the tops of our pumpkin pies. We just started with a square piece of that white felt and just did some spiral cuts in that. Maybe you guys have seen these before. You can actually make flowers using this technique. And we just glued the ends of that together. And here I actually glued the end and kind of flipped up those layers a little bit to make it look more like a dollop, or where you have used a piping bag to pop your whipped cream onto the top of your pumpkin pies. And I just used some additional hot glue here and there to make sure that I had all of those spirals glued together, and so they wouldn't come apart once I glued them to the tops of my pies. And for the crust, I just used my brown felt and cut some very small strips using my rotary cutter. These were probably about 1/4 of an inch in width. And this part was very tedious, getting the crust onto my pies. I hope I can explain how I did this well. It may just be easier for you guys to watch it on the video. I just started by folding one end under of that felt piece, just glued that down, and then I would just fold it over, hot glue that, and then I would hot glue underneath. I just continued that all the way around for each of my little pies. And this took 3.5 of those strips for each of the pies to completely go around. And just try to go along with that curve of your pie as best as you can. I hope that makes sense for you guys. Maybe you can see that better as I am doing that on the video, and by the third one I had gotten pretty good at this method, so it didn't take as long with that one. But this was the longest part of this project, is just gluing down that pie crust. But I think it is so cute. I love the way that it looks scalloped and actually like real pie crust. And once you have all of your crust glued on, it's just time to add your whipped cream to the top. I just put that on with some hot glue. And I actually decided not to glue these onto the top of my ramekins. You could totally do that if you wanted to, but I thought it would be really fun just to add some little candy or treats in these. These will be really cute to add to your Thanksgiving table as place settings for each of your guests. I love how these turn out. These are so cute. I just love the whipped cream on the top. What do you guys think about these? Thank you all so much for watching today. That is going to wrap up the fall DIYs for the 2024 season, and Christmas crafts will be coming out very soon. So if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do so you don't miss out on those new videos. Please give this video a thumbs up, and if you enjoyed this today, please share so someone else can watch these crafts as well. And I will see you guys in the next one.